Hi, welcome to the Secret Men's Business Podcast. This is Joey Buzzertool. On today's show, we're going to be speaking to a man from America who is a specialist in dealing with trauma and the human psyche. In this day and age, I think a lot of us have been consumed with being victims or actually blaming or, getting caught in a narrative in our head and forgetting about what it's like to be human and considering what other people are going through. On today's show, we're going to be speaking to MICHAEL VEE, all the way from the USA. Now, guys, really, I hope you look forward to hearing this interview because we've got a specialist here who's going to help us to understand what it's like to unravel the human psyche. So let's welcome to the show, MICHAEL VEE. Hi, Michael. How are you?
Hey, how you doing? It's great to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. I mean, like you and I have been trying to catch up for a while, but you went on a bit of a road trip, didn't you?
Yeah, well, whenever I have downtime, I like to sort of get out, and it's basically a road trip. There occasionally I'll literally just get in my car and figure it out as I'm traveling. I strongly believe in the healing power of the outdoors and the environment and all of that, and so I embrace that as much as I can. And here, we're transitioning out of summer, and it's going to start to become winter, so. I despise cold weather. I will hibernate through the winter and not go outside and just lay in bed with a blanket over my head. So I try to get out now as much as I can and really just enjoy it.
Well, that excites me because it means we're going into summer. Woo woo! So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell the audience just a little bit of an overview of yourself before we get started going deep. So tell us a little bit about your history.
Well, my story it's funny because it's sort of a complicated story, but it's the story of almost anyone that's experienced any kind of trauma. I had a very normal upbringing, a very sort of standard suburban Long Island, New York upbringing. My parents were divorced, and that never really affected me in any way, shape, or form. But I was one person for a very, very long time, and I experienced a series of traumatic events all within a very short period of time. And I did not handle these events well. The truth of the matter is I was very immature at the time. Even though I was technically an adult, I was still operating under a very immature sort of mindset. And these events sort of snowballed into a complete loss of identity. I suffered a tremendous amount of trauma, dealt with a tremendous amount of PTSD because of that. And I got to a point in my life where I don't know if anybody is ever actively suicidal. I don't like to use the word actively when talking about suicide, but I was. I sat around dreaming. It was the only thing that would actually make me happy was the thought that one day I could end all of this immediately. And I did all the things that people do when you're in that situation. I Googled the best way to end my life. I can tie a hangman's noose in my sleep if need be. And I went and these events. See, it's funny. Throughout my research and throughout everything that I've been through, the one thing that I don't hear a lot from people who are in that position, in that desperate sort of state of mind, is the ramifications of what it means and what happens to you when you actually get out of it. When you are literally at the very edge of your life, when you just want it all to end, and then you make it through those dark times into a little bit of a better area. There is a part of that sticks with you forever. It's almost like a stain on your soul. Like it does not go away. And I used to be afraid of that stain. I used to be very fearful of it because I was afraid that it would rear its head again. But I realized that it's something to be proud of. It's not something to hide from. And the more I hid from it, the worse it got. But the more I exposed it, the more I let people know that it was there. And hey, look, I've been through this. Look, here's my battle scars to prove that. And here's the stain that lives with me forever. It gave me a strength to continue. And not just that, but it gave me the insight that, and I have long said that and I might have even mentioned this to you, that there is no higher calling in life than to be in service of others. It's the answer to the big mystery of life. Why are we here? It's real simple. We're here to be in service of others. It's the way you ascend. And this is just what I believe. It's the way you ascend. And I don't mean ascend, go to heaven. I mean ascend as being a person, a real functioning, actualized, fully realized human being. We're here to help others. I didn't always think that, though. I wasn't always that guy. And once I realized that, it was a game changer. It was like my life stopped here. I hit a brick wall, and then my new life emerged on the other side of it. And I've been doing that ever since.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that I had a suicidal ideation as well. And so the way that you described it, I agree, is that I remember when I was going to do the same thing as you with the rope, and I remember being on the floor crying, and my parents came in, and in that moment we all understood, and it's like I broke, and it was like it was over. So it was this really weird scenario. I was about to do something bad, but I had to do that bad thing to actually understand myself. So with the stain that you were talking about, how I see that is that reminds me every day of the life that I'm living. And so when they come together, I feel really sort of content or accepting with the fact that I almost did that. But I almost did that, I think, because of the thing that you just said with service. So it is interesting how people can come out of that situation and change their whole lives, because I guess the other option is not coming back, isn't it?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. There are people, and it is unfortunate that there are people that they stay on that edge forever. They don't know how to come back from it. Everything. Once I understood that I had the ability to change my life, once I understood that that power was inside of me, that it wasn't external forces, I wasn't the product of my sadness, I wasn't the product of my past transgressions. It didn't own me. I owned it. I put it in a cage and I controlled it. And once I realized that I had the ability to do that, that's when I started to say, well, look, if I can do it, and literally, if I can do it, anybody could do it, because I was lower than anybody I'd ever heard of being that low before. But there are people that they stay on that precipice. They stay on the edge of that cliff looking over, just waiting for the winds to change one way or the other. And they don't realize that you can fix this. You can change yourself. You can get better. But it does take work, and it does take your acknowledgement of the bad in order to. And
that's the problem, I think, isn't it? Like, for you and for us two, us wanting to end our lives was that catalyst, right? And so in my service, I try and get people to be aware that they can actually do something now rather than actually have to go through a crisis like that. But, I mean, I was reading some statistics lately, and I was a bit shocked. Like, it said that there's only roughly around 36% of the population in Western world that actually believe in doing therapy, right? So that means all those other people are sort of suffering, or they're just living their lives on the surface, which is why there's such a big demand and need for people like ourselves. So for you, what do you feel is the modern day trauma? I mean, I know COVID is here, but what are you seeing as the modern day trauma for men and basically for everyone? Like, COVID has taken up a lot of our time, but there's still other things underneath that.
Well, right now in this day and age, the contemporary trauma that we're all experiencing, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, or even if we even begin to understand it, because we are experiencing a collective trauma with COVID. There's no question about it. And I truly believe that we're not going to recognize how traumatic these events are for years to come. There will be ramifications that we recognize years from now and say, wow, this is all because of that. The other part of that is, what is the trauma of today's age? That's twofold. There's two parts that I think personally. One, for men, it is always, and I believe that it's always going to be that sense of masculinity, that we as men are not supposed to talk about this. We're not supposed to feel these things. We're supposed to get up and walk it off, and that'll be the end of it. And for a very, very long time, I was one of those people that said that. When growing up as a kid, my brother had depression, and I didn't I didn't believe it was real. I never bought into the whole thing that, depression was real. I used to tell them all the time, there's nothing that a beer won't fix. But after I had my own round with it, I realized the strength of it and the power of it. But so for men, it's always going to be that stigma. No matter what happens, it's somewhere in the world, there's always going to be that stigma that lives with it. Beyond that, I truly, and this is going to make me sound like a grumpy old curmudgeon man,
No.
but I truly believe people don't understand how destructive this digital age is to people developing their own personal character and their own identity today. I mean, we live in an age of
distractions,
I truly think that influencer is the worst thing that ever happened to this planet. The concept of an Instagram influencer or somebody that has that type of power over so many people, their mindset when they're just forming their own ideas and their own opinions is truly problematic, and it's created chaos. There's no other way to put it.
Can I just? I mean, I agree with you that there has been a major shift with that, but I still think that there is. I think that in history, there's always going to be things that people are drawn to. Yes, this is the biggest, and it's bigger than ever. But I sort of connect that also to the fact that so many people just don't want to. They want to be distracted. They want to be led. They don't want to look at themselves, which I find really surprising. Especially since COVID, like some of my friends that I see on Facebook, for example, they're still complaining about the same things like 18 months later, right? Like, so I find that really sort of funny. Like, don't they notice that there is something wrong? So what do you think is why are people resisting to start healing the trauma? Why are they, why are they going towards distraction rather than going towards internal growth?
Oh, well, I mean, that's easy. Healing is hard. This is hard. This is the hardest thing I've ever done.
Do you really think? Don't you think that what you went through in that pain was harder than this? Like, don't you think that before you broke and you came to be this man, that was harder? Because the funny thing is that I understand what you're saying. It is hard, but I personally think this is not as hard as the torture I went through when I was going through that pain.
Well, the pain. The first part of that, I had no control over. Like, I was in pain. I liken it to this. Let's say, for argument's sake, God forbid, you get into a motorcycle accident and then you need months and months and months of physical therapy to get you to walk again. Getting into the motorcycle accident is easy. I don't have to do anything to get into a motorcycle accident. I just close my eyes and crash my bike. Deciding that my life is worth fixing and I'm going to do the work so that I can now be not just who I was before, but 10 times better than I've ever been.
Yes.
That's hard. And I will say this, though. It has been, first of all, it's ongoing. I don't ever want to be complacent in that. I want to continue to heal. And even though I'm 1,000 times better than where I was, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever it was, it's given me the perspective that there's more to go and there's always going to be another step. And I thrive, absolutely love the idea that there's more to learn. There's more to learn about myself. There's more to learn about other people. I can always help somebody. I have, the ability to reach out and if nothing else, be a comforting ear. But that work scares people. It's scary. It is absolutely scary. And I'll tell you, I'll tell you a very quick story. When I was at my absolute lowest, okay, I sat in a dingy basement apartment, and I couldn't wait to die. I just could not wait to die. I had a dirty old couch and a hand-me-down coffee table. I sat down on my dirty couch. I sat in front of my hand-me-down coffee table. I put a piece of paper on the table. I put a pen next to the piece of paper, and I put a loaded shotgun in my mouth. And I said, just give me one reason not to pull that trigger. Just one. Just come up with one single reason not to pull that trigger. And I have never been less afraid in my entire life than I was in that moment, because there was truly nothing to be afraid
Yes.
for. Thankfully, and I couldn't come up with a single reason. Thankfully, a friend of mine she was trying to get in touch with me. She kept calling and calling and calling, and I was ignoring it on my phone. And then finally, she got through. I said, "All right, I'm going to answer this." And I had a conversation with her, and she talked me out of it. But I was terrified to keep living. I was terrified to go on. I didn't want to go on. And I'll tell you something else. Going back to the conversation about the thing that stains you. This is 5 years ago. I can still taste the gunmetal in my mouth.
Yeah.
I can't. There's no amount of water that I can drink that will ever erase it. And that's good. That I carry that with me because it's important. It gives me focus. Like you don't ever want to go back to that. So here's your scar to remember that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you a quick story because it's funny that you mentioned the walking, because 5 years ago, I woke up and I couldn't walk. I had like a neuro disease, and I was walking one day, and then the next day I was bedridden and had to learn how to walk. And if we go back 5 years before that, I had my first breakdown, right? That's how I got into this work about 12 years ago. And I had a relationship breakdown, and I didn't know anything. So I had no tools, no skills, wanted to end my life and all that. So I went and did all the hard work, and I really look back at that. And that was the reason, I think, why I survived not walking. Because when I couldn't walk, I was actually quite surprised how calm I was. I didn't attach to anything. I just labeled it as, this is what's happening right now. But I don't think I would have done that if I didn't have the skills from 5-6 years before that. You know, so I always question it, going, wow, I wonder what would happen if I didn't have that and I just couldn't walk. It would have been the hardest thing. I probably would have done something terrible. But I was able to use all the skills and really remind myself that really what I've got is all that I've got. That's it, right? And so rather than saying, oh my God, I can't walk, I was saying, how can I use not walking in my life, right? How can I do things? And my coach kept saying, you need to surrender, you need to surrender. And I thought I was surrendering. So I am surrendering. And he goes, no, you need to surrender. And it took me months to understand what that meant. When I finally did it, I walked 3 days later. So it was really quite bizarre how the mind can control how you are feeling if you stay stuck in that sort of thought of, I'm not going to, or it's too hard. So in regards to that, how much does wellness and thought process input, create the world that people live in?
It's everything. It's absolutely everything. And that is a very, very hard lesson to learn, because it's something that you have actually unlearned. When you were a kid, you were impulse. When you were a child, you were impulse. And everything in your child mind, and I get that you're a little kid and things, you don't know anything, but in your child mind, everything made sense, regardless of how stupid it was. You would tell your mom, Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be a tractor. And it made sense to you. You wanted to be a tractor, and in your mind, you could be that tractor. As we get older and as we experience life and as we go through the motions of being human beings on this planet, we lose that. We lose that understanding that the way we take in information, the way we process information, is the way we expel it. So I always say, garbage in, garbage out. If you're going to sit there and you're going to complain about things all day long, the only thing you're going to have left is things to complain about.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm certainly not saying to ignore or pretend or to live in a delusional world, because that's just as bad. But we do have the ability to alter. I call it reframing. It's a reframing of your personal lens.
Yeah.
And it makes every last difference, every single last difference in every aspect of your life.
Yeah. And that's what I think. I think that's what you were saying earlier about being hard work. It's a hard work. You got to sit in it. You've got to meditate. You've got to learn to detach. It takes time. And, people think it does. People meet me, and I'm sure they do the same for you, and they really do think it's really easy. They think, if you can do it, I can do it. But I meditate for 2 hours a day, and I've been doing that for like 15 years. It is hard. It is hard work. But going back to what I said earlier, I personally don't think it's hard. It's hard because it's part of my life. That's one of my things now. I try and teach people that we brush our teeth every day, right? Like, why aren't we doing something for our mental state every day? You know, why are people reactive rather than being proactive? I don't think people have clicked yet that it's such an important thing. I was hoping that COVID was going to be that factor for people to click that, hey, we need to support our minds. We need to look after one another. But I don't know, in Australia, they're not doing that yet. We're fighting with each other here. So
well, when COVID first broke, when it first broke here in the United States, there was almost an immediate sense in certain areas of community, and it was very nice to feel that because we were sort of all in this uncertain area together. And then that immediately just devolved into a Mad Max scenario where people were basically eating each other. You know, they fighting over toilet paper and bottled water and things like that. And then it's the human condition. I don't know. So here in the United States, whenever there's an impending snowstorm or a hurricane, people rush to the supermarket and they buy up all the milk, all the bread, all the eggs, and it's a catastrophe. People are just, you know, there's a literal breakdown of society just under the pretense of an upcoming snowstorm, which we go through every single year, and I'll never understand why people panic. However, getting back to your point, I think the reason people have a problem not giving themselves what they need to develop mentally and to develop that mental strength is because it's almost not a tangible. If you sit and you work out your arms every day, you see results. You know what I mean? Like, okay, my biceps are getting bigger or whatever it is. If I run, I start to lose weight. I can see the tangible benefits. Mental health is not that. And the problem is that you have to be your own critic. You have to be your own auditor. Like, nobody's going to sit there and point a finger at you saying, do you feel mentally well yet? Are you mentally healthy? Are you happy yet? Why aren't you happy? Get happy. It's just not how it works. You have to audit your own self and understand why you're not happy, why you're not getting better.
Yeah.
And
but that's why I thought now was the time that people would notice, because there's so many people talking about it. Even though I know that some of them are influencers, but it is it's in the lines at the moment. Like a lot of men in Australia, I'm sure over there too, they are wanting to change. So I know that it's the population thing. It will happen because eventually. If COVID doesn't slow down, it is going to start impacting people. And you're right, people have to take responsibility and no one's going to rescue them. So along the line, I guess, I don't know, like for myself, my practice has tripled this year, like tripled. So I know that more people are wanting help. In the past, it used to be, oh, I'm not seeing a therapist, but now they want to see a therapist. So I guess I like talking about this, even though I know at the back end there is reality. But I sort of like to push. I'm a coach that pushes people, and I think it works for the people that come to me. And I can hear that in your voice too. There has to be reality rather than how do you feel? How do you feel? We have to speak real now, because otherwise we're just going to sit in the feelings. And some people just don't shift. They just they don't have solutions. So I know you work with wellness and all that. So what's your definition of wellness? And how do people seek it for themselves? Because it's such a big word.
Well, and yes, you're right. Wellness, I don't think it's easily described because it really is different for everybody. If I talk to somebody and, the best thing they did that day was get up and have a conversation with me, whereas 5 days ago or a week ago or 10 days ago they couldn't. That's wellness. They're getting better. They've made a step forward. Me, at the time, me pulling a gun out of my mouth is a step towards wellness. It's a relative term, and it varies from person to person. It also varies day to day. What I consider wellness today might not be what I consider wellness next week. It really is. It's an ongoing process. It requires constant maintenance, but I actually don't like calling it maintenance because it sounds like it's something you're obligated to do. It should be something you want to do. It should be something you get excited to do. And that's I try to get people to see that, shift their focus from this being hard work, which it always will be, but not that it's scary hard work. It's the hard work that you love to do. You actually get excited about doing it. Once you get into that mindset, you can really start to attack this like the way I feel it should be attacked. And look, if one day it's just getting up and going outside and walking around your block, a 10-minute walk around your block, and you weren't able to do that before, that's wellness.
Yeah.
That's a part of wellness.
Yeah.
Being able to meditate for 10 minutes, that's a step in the right direction. I tell people all the time, it all starts with the self. You have to start with the self, period, the end. You can't help somebody else until you can help yourself. I certainly couldn't.
Yeah.
Take a longer shower if need be, whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I sort of I love that. And what I add to clients is, rather than, I understand the self thing, but I always say nothing will change unless you have a why, which is, that's why some people, I remember when I got my very first Louise Hay book, right? That was my first self-help book when I was like 20 something. I don't know why I bought it, but I bought it and I didn't read it for 7 years. It just sat on my shelf. Right, like looking back, that book could have helped me in those 7 years, but I wasn't ready. I was in my 20s. I wanted to go out there and drink and party, and then I had my first trauma, and that's when I started noticing. And I think we need to add one other thing, if it's okay, is that we need to really highlight, because it's men. Men do have a tendency to use external things to feel like they're in wellness, which is drinking and drugs and distraction. And so we need to highlight that, when you have to make a decision to change, if you are drinking or taking drugs or doing those things, it is going to be a bit harder and may just take a little bit longer, because those things can feel like self-medicating and you may not think that you need to do any wellness. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I know I've got a few clients that drink, but they don't really connect with their emotions because the alcohol numbs them. But I think with wellness, there needs to be a tiny little bit of connection to self, like you were saying.
Well, I mean, physical wellness and mental wellness go hand in hand. You can achieve one without the other. Obviously, you could be physically fit and be mentally unwell, and vice versa. But this is a package. You have to look at yourself. If need be, think of yourself as a car. There's no point detailing the outside if the interior is falling apart. You know what I mean? Like, don't wash and wax, and put Armor All on the tires if that car's not going anywhere. And so, I agree. Look, in my early years, in my teens, my 20s, my 30s, hell, even into my 40s, I was drinking a lot, and I did my share of drugs. I did your share of drugs. I did my audience share of drugs. I was in that world. I grew up in the punk rock scene in New York City, so I was surrounded by it. But yes, you cannot continue if your version of maintenance is self-medicating. You're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah,
those wounds won't heal. They just won't.
Yes, it's and that's like another podcast in itself, isn't it? We're coming up to the end of the show, but I want to ask you one last question. Is like, if you could normalize a behavior that people could step into, what would you tell the audience in regards to try? Because I think with men there is a bit of stigma with wellness, because they see that as a soft sort of, I don't need to do that, I can't do this. But so what do you think would be one thing that they should maybe consider and normalize for themselves, that yourself, all through your own audience, that has really worked or helped?
Okay, so there's two things actually. For me personally, if I had a friend next to me and I could impart anything onto my friend, I would absolutely say explore the spiritual side of your beings. Explore spirituality, no matter what that means to you. And I don't mean religion, I mean spirituality. I mean understanding yourself. Beyond that, because that's really what helped me. Beyond that, do not be afraid of your emotions. Do not be afraid of what you're feeling. Your fear is what starts to develop into shame. Your fear morphs into shame, and the shame is the thing that you shove down inside of you because you don't want anybody to know about it.
Yeah.
the problem with that is the more you hide from that, the more you shove it down, the worse it gets. You can't, if you put your fears in front of you, you strip them of their power. Period. The end. They no longer have any sway over you whatsoever. The reason I'm open about my suicidal ideations is because I'm not afraid of them anymore. I'm not ashamed of them.
Yeah.
I put them in front of me and I say, look, here is where I was. And you know what? It sucked. It absolutely sucked. But because I got through this, I can now help other people, which is what I do. And so embrace those emotions. Embrace all of them. Embrace your sadness. If you're a man and you feel like crying, be a man and cry. Period. The end. You don't there's no such thing as a man card. You don't lose your man credibility. You're still a man. You can still have kids. Don't be afraid of that. Embrace it and share it.
Yeah, I mean that is. I think that's the mission for all of us, isn't it? I think, like you said, it's an old running history that men have been really afraid to be vulnerable. But I think we're on the way. So, Michael, thank you so much for being on the show. I think we know. Well, I know that you'll be back. So, because we could talk about this for hours, can't we?
Oh yeah,
like
absolutely.
Hours and hours.
The reason I wanted to be here, the reason I wanted to talk to you is because I immediately recognized that we have a shared passion in this conversation, and it's a conversation that needs to happen. And the fact that you're having it in Australia and I'm having it in the United States is incredibly powerful. The fact that we can reach all of those people, it's all I want to do. It's really all I want to do at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you again from Australia, and we'll hopefully see you very soon. All right, everyone, you've been listening to the Secret Men's Business podcast. Now, don't forget the new podcasts are out on Monday, and we have retro podcasts out every Thursday, so you can get to listen to all the library of all the interviews that I've done. Now, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button so you get notified of all our interviews when they're launched on our channel. Now, just want to remind everyone that I've got another podcast that is it's very different to this. It's called the Idiomonia Connection Podcast, where I interview people that are inspirational and just ask them random questions. And by doing that, you get to hear about how they become inspired. So season 1 was really good and it was a big hit. Season 2 is about to launch, and I'm interviewing 10 influential young adults. So that's really interesting when you hear what they're doing. I got really worked up. Anyway, so please look out for that in October. Until next time, guys, see you later. Bye.